Okay, so I'm going to introduce the panel. This panel is entitled Witnessing Our History, Claiming the Black German Experience. This panel is one of two panels that are really intended to highlight the very diverse experiences of Black Germans and to place their firsthand accounts of Black German experience at the center of our conversations. Our panel is composed of three very different takes on that experience. They diverge in numerous ways, from age and generation to time period and place to family circumstances, background, and upbringing. Yet each of them provides us with an important window into understanding what they share as members of this community who embrace the term Black German in different ways, yet nevertheless stake a common claim to this identity. Our panelists will be sharing their reflections on the cultural and historical settings that made them who they are, and talking about some of the choices they've made in relation to their experiences. We've asked them to think out loud about the importance of race in their lives, as well as when they came to an understanding of themselves as racialized, as Black, and as Black German. Each panelist will begin with a brief statement or a narrative. Some will read them, some will not read them. We have actually left this wide open to them to actually shape themselves, because it's not our intention to dictate how anybody should tell their own stories. So I'm going to emphasize that so that you are open to what I invited you to do initially, which is to listening attentively and to engaging the different ways they tell their story, as well as the different content of their stories. So I'm going to start by introducing everyone, and then go over to just allow them to present their statements. Our first speaker is going to be Carmen Geschke. Carmen Geschke is founder and president of ProTech Enterprises LLC, a Greer, South Carolina-based company founded in 2004, and she's also a trustee of the Black German Cultural Society. She also serves as a board member and secretary of the Foothills Regional Advisory Committee, as well as being board chair of the YWCA in Greenville, South Carolina. She's a native of Germany and a graduate of the VWA in Stuttgart, a Wirtschafts- and Verwaltungsakademie, where she received a degree in accounting. Kevina King will be our second speaker. Kevina was born and raised in Berlin, Germany. She moved to the United States in 2002 at the age of 16. And she is now a first-year MA student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She received her BA in German and psychology at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And her current research examines transnational and national constructs of people of color in Germany and people of color in German literature. And our final speaker panelist is Lara-Sophie Milagro, who was born in Berlin, Germany, and trained as an actress at Goldsmiths College and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. And as well, in 2008, she trained as an opera singer at the University of Arts in Berlin. Since 2008, Lara-Sophie is an ensemble member and co-artistic director of Label Noir, a professional Afro-German Black theater ensemble based in Berlin. Lara-Sophie also works for Label Noir as an actress and author, and their first production, Homeland, Bittersweet Homeland, was shown with great success throughout Germany. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. And I'm going to ask Carmen to begin.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here. It's amazing to be among Black Germans, and I had experienced that last year the first time, and I'm still excited and very, very, very much emotional about it, because that's something I thought that would never happen in my life. So, we heard this morning things that like Peggy said or Yara, and a lot of it just really touched my life experience. I'm born in Stuttgart right after the war. So Stuttgart is the state of Baden-Württemberg, so when you remember the statistic that you saw and the picture that you saw, it's one of the two states where the most Black children were born, and I was one of the 600 or whatever. I never knew there were 600, but I guess I'm one of them. I grew up with my mother, so I was neither shipped out nor adopted nor had to endure a home. I grew up with my mother, and she later had another child by, another man. And so my mother, of course, was very not respected in the community, very looked down, as, the women at that time just had to endure that. On the other hand, I grew up with grandparents who were almost colorblind. They somehow never knew I was different. So, I had a lot of good stuff in my life. And when I listened to, especially what Yara presented, it made my heart really, really hurt, because so many children had to endure so many bad things and be abused. And, I myself, when I went to school, my teacher had just returned from being an officer with the SR, and that's pretty much how he ran the classroom. And so I was singled out a lot, I was looked at a lot, I was not his favorite child. But years later, when I went to our first class reunion, very reluctantly and only after finding out whether or not that he would come or not, other class members said, he always singled me out, he always looked down on me, he always did. And I said, well, you know what, maybe it wasn't me. And that's part of the experience that I have in my life. Sometimes I thought everything that bad that happened to me because I'm black, I'm German, I'm different, I'm an outsider. And maybe not so. Some of the things have to be looked at again and adjusted. So, again, back to my own personal story. So I grew up with my mother. People would say things to me such as, you're a really nice girl, but your mother's just a whore. And that makes for a very difficult experience when you're a child. However, I was 17 and I got pregnant, and everybody was thinking, okay, here we go again. Here, history repeats itself. So my husband, my late husband, we got married. I was 17, he was 18, we eloped. And then the miracle happened. We came back, we lived as a family. And I all of a sudden was not the daughter of this not so respected mother, but the wife of this very respected young man. So I was somebody totally different. And I have embraced that naturally. And remember, we were living in Stuttgart in the Swabian heartland. So I became the poster child of a Swabian housewife. I cleaned my house every day. I, did the windows just to make sure that people would respect me and accept me, which has worked to an extent. We also, my husband and I, we have also very fast discovered that only education will get us to where we wanted to be in life. And so for the first 10 years of our married life, we were married 42 years altogether. We did nothing but you get your master's, I get my master's, go to school, do this. And it was very difficult because of course we had our child. Our son today lives in Austin. He's a senior IT engineer, and he really turned out great. You can tell I love him. And so, when I heard this morning, and so that's a little bit, my life. To end this segment, we came in '99 to this country for the love of the U.S. We really loved the U.S. and there was always something in me that wanted to be over here, but my husband too. And so for us, we had a dream, and we went and made our dream come true. And my husband was a automotive engineer, so he came with Daimler to Detroit, and today I live in South Carolina, all somehow automotive related. And what I wanted to say concerning history, I never felt that I, as a black German, had any history. when I think Peggy mentioned it today, and it came about, I think when Yara talked, I didn't even have a name of who I was. When I grew up, there was no name for us. There was no, oh, she's a Black German. I maybe was, you know, what they all, I was a Negerle, I was this, I was that. But if you don't have a name for who you are, it's very hard to find out who you are really. And it's very hard to have a history and to have something to be proud of, because you have to create that all. So for me, I tried to be, who I was living with, which was my husband, which was a German white community, and I tried to fit in that under all circumstances. Today, you know, there is the Black German Cultural Society, there is Rosemary, and you know, we refer to us as sisters, and I think we are closer sisters than I am with my half-sister, because there is something we share together, there is something that belongs to us, that's something that we are proud of, that's something that we have accomplished too. You know, we heard all those terrible stories, but I look at my story as a great good story, because yeah, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of problems, if you will, but if you're strong, if you overcome that, then you know you can create your life and you be the history. So, you know, among all of those that we saw today, I want to also be there, not me personally, but me as an example for others who have made it, who are happy, who are there, and who, you know, want to go forward helping this organization, our Black German Cultural Society, to connect with others. And I think that is what I miss the most when I look at my life, is connection. This to be connected with somebody who is like I am, you know. And I just today talked to a lady, and it so touched my heart. She said, I'm not connected here and here. And this is maybe what we can do here, connect with each other and you know, look at our history and go forward with it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. First, I want to thank Tina for this wonderful introduction of this panel, because I believe it's so important what we're all doing here today, and Rosemary as well for having me, and having such a thing as a Black German Culture Society. When I heard about it, I almost fainted. What a beautiful thing. Thank you. I had a lot of mixed feelings about being on this particular panel, because it's so personal. And it's difficult to separate emotions in front of a public like this. But I will give my best. Growing up in Berlin, I didn't have a lot of white German friends. There were certain districts that we stuck to, me and the other foreigners. And there were certain areas and certain things we knew not to do by rule of thumb. But I think it's important to share that, as difficult as it might be. So, just to get to my story here. In the world of racism and discrimination and rejection, I consider it a personal obligation as a Black German to ensure our history is told for us and for future generations. Given that there is no group either inside or outside of Germany on which Black Germans can model their identity, I find it to be of utmost importance for Black Germans themselves to articulate, define, redefine what it means to be a Black German. As such, my narration is only a belated contribution. I mean, I'm sitting in a room with great minds that have paved the way already. But here's my belated contribution anyways. So, contribution to the construction of a common history that can only be traced in lived experiences. In order to narrate what the Black German experience is and has been to me, I would like to identify 3 different stages in my life, which I would like to share with you. The self-ascribed label Black German is, I hope to outline, the result of a 26-year-long process in which my Blackness and my Germanness was constantly questioned and ridiculed. Similar to any other identity, the Black German one, for me, is one that is ever-evolving and very complex. It has been manifested by these 3 separate but equally important stages: becoming German, becoming Black, and becoming a Black German. So the first stage, becoming German. I was born and raised as an only child in Berlin in 1985, to a white German mother from Berlin and a Black American father from Georgia. My father was stationed in Berlin when he met and married my mother, but was discharged when I turned 2. We never lived near the base. Instead, we lived in a district my mother lived in all her life, Tempelhof. Tempelhof, the district of Berlin that I spent the first 16 years of my life in, belonged to the American sector. Compared to other districts that belonged to the American sector, Tempelhof did not house large US military barracks. All Tempelhof had was its famous airport with the Berlin Airlift Memorial on Platz der Luftbrücke in front of the airport. This memorial offered a reminder of the American allies. Different from Zehlendorf and Steglitz, the districts in which the US Army, while I was growing up, still maintained 4 large military barracks, Tempelhof did not have a post exchange, or we just call it a PX, did not have a commissary, nor did Tempelhof have American elementary schools or high schools. Tempelhof itself had not only very little presence of military personnel, and with that, Black GIs and their children, it was also less culturally diverse compared to other districts in Berlin, such as Kreuzberg or Neukölln. For me, this meant that I only saw other Black Germans, or Black people in general, on the weekends that my parents could afford to go to commissary to buy groceries in bulk. This did not happen every weekend, and most of the time we went shopping at a German supermarket. Most of the time, I did not see any Black Germans or Black people in general. Most of the time, I was the only one. I was the only one in my neighborhood, the only one in kindergarten, the only one in preschool, and the only one in my class. Most of the time, I was the only one on the train, at the public pool, or at a birthday party. I never saw a Black German cashier, doctor, bus driver, or teacher. There were no role models to look up to and identify with. Becoming German in this environment was, as such, difficult. Part of becoming German is being accepted as such amongst other Germans. Regardless of the fact that my citizenship status was always that of a German, it is the right to claim my Germanness that I had to struggle for, the most, and that I keep struggling for till this day. There has not been a time in my life that my Germanness was not questioned, contested, or need to be explained. As a toddler, my pediatrician asked my mother where she had me from. When my mother replied, "That's my daughter," the doctor turned and faced her and said, "Sure." In kindergarten and preschool, most of my white German peers did not want to play with me and regularly told me, "Hau ab, deine Haut sieht aus wie Scheiße." When I ran home crying to tell my mom that the other children told me to get away from them because my skin looked like shit. My mom told me, just tell them their skin looks like stinky cheese. Believe me, that never worked. They never went home crying. Okay? Well, in elementary school and in high school, the teasing decreased. Partially because the children in the neighborhood had gotten used to me, and partially because I was the tallest and strongest girl on the block. I took up judo. But leaving my neighborhood continued to be a problem, though. The ride with the train or bus was always uncomfortable because people would always stare. There was an unwritten rule of thumb: don't go to the east. Don't be out at night. Don't go there. Definitely don't go outside of Berlin. The rest of Germany, you might as well not even try. Not saying this is justified, but this was the rule of thumb. The fall of the Berlin Wall, as joyous and as an iconic moment in history this might have been, to my family, this signalized the end of our happy family. In 1994, as expected to happen sooner or later, American troops were pulled out of Berlin, and for my family, this meant that my dad was going to lose his job. My father did lose his job and most of his friends, and in 1997, he couldn't stand living in Germany any longer. He moved back to Georgia for a couple of weeks and then said, I can't stand Georgia either. I gotta go to the West, and he ended up in Las Vegas. Losing my father to another continent stripped me of the reminder why I looked the way that I did. It took away that normalcy. I felt angry and alone. The second stage is characterized by becoming black. Until this stage, I wasn't black. I don't know what I was, but I wasn't black. My dad was black, but I wasn't. People refer to me as Mischling, English translation, crossbreed or hybrid, mongrel even in some dictionaries, or mulatto, or halb schwarz, half black. They never call me half white. So. Well, I didn't like any of these terms. I just didn't feel like they represented me. In the year 1999, my father had been gone for 2 years now and lived in Las Vegas, as I said. And this is the summer right before 8th grade. I finally went and visited him for the first time. Since he had to work every day, I picked up the only book that was in his house, the autobiography of Malcolm X. This book changed everything. Although Malcolm's life began and ceased during a different time, on a different continent, to mine, I could relate in so many ways to his discontent with the hegemonic state and his continuous fight for disillusionment of the self. But more significant was the sense of self-esteem and pride that I developed from it. As a result of this newfound confidence, I was ready to come out of the closet to my family and friends. Back home, the summer ended, book is finished. I'm standing in my mother's kitchen and I tell her, Mama, ich bin schwarz. Mom, I'm black. She's like, no, you're not. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not? Well, was ist mit mir? What about me? I didn't know what to say. I was leaving her out of the equation, and it hurt me that it hurt her, that I found an identity that she wasn't a part of. Frustrated at this, the next day I went to school and talked to one of my best friends. I was sure she would understand me. She was Black German as well. Both of her parents were from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I told her what happened between my mother and me, and she replied, she agreed with my mother. She said, Kevina, you're not black. How could you be black? Your mom is white. I tried to explain to her that I too knew how it feels to be the only one. I too constantly deemed foreigner. I too knew how it feels to avoid certain areas of our own city. She was not convinced, and I was hurt. That made me realize that now I was not only fighting for acceptance among whites, but also among blacks. And there was no one to look up to that was like me. Once again, I was angry and alone. It was time to go. I was ready. Ready to leave Germany, my homeland, in the hope to find something that was missing. I moved to Las Vegas when I was 16 to live with my dad. I remember the first day of school during lunch break. By noon, somebody told me there was going to be a fight between two high school gangs behind the gym. When I arrived behind the gym, the fight had already started, excuse me. But it was not the violence that shocked me. It was the sheer number of blacks my age in all facets. And I was extremely happy. All I could think of was the beauty of the mass, the beauty of the sheer numbers, that I've never seen that way. I was not the only one anymore. Finally, I wasn't the center of attention anymore. I would be able to fit in and hide. I did my best to lose my small German accent, adapted to the slang and customs of rough Vegas high school, and only mentioned where I was from when it was necessary. I was in exile, and I didn't mind it one bit. If it wasn't for my mother's continuous attempts to keep German and Germany in my life, who knows? But in the 9 years that I spent in Las Vegas, she called me every Sunday to give me a Berlin update. The weather, the news, politics, my grandma, whatever. She sent me packages for Christmas, and it was only a few Decembers ago that I stopped opening little advent calendar doors. It was important to her that I didn't lose my German. She dragged me back to Berlin whenever she could afford it. My Germanness crept back up and fused with my blackness. And I became a black German. It is only very recent that I have an understanding what this actually means to me. And then last year, upon entering grad school and being confronted by Sarah Lennox and all the homework that she gives us, and the various texts that we had to read from some of you beautiful, wonderful people in this room, I was confronted with various texts, and that emancipated myself from the fear of self-exposure. I understand that I have an obligation as well, just like some of you felt you had an obligation. And it's not a passion anymore, it's not a choice anymore, but it's home for the first time. Thank you.
Hello. First of all, I want to apologize again that I came here late. My cell phone's still on. I just came. I'm so sorry because that's just a no-go. And I just came out of the last class of the last day of an amazing acting class I've taken here in New York at the Lara-Sophie School, a Chekhov intensive class, and they're very strict about attendance. And I had to be there till the last minute, and I rushed here in a taxi. So I do apologize. And yeah, and thank you both for your stories. I'm like already very emotional, yeah, and I feel very honored that I have the opportunity to share my feelings and my story about being Afro-German with you. As I just mentioned, the acting course that I was doing here in New York, that was an overwhelming experience for me because for the first time in my life, I'm in professional acting since 10 years. I was sitting in this case, Chekhov course in an acting class where you do classical and modern theater, and there were people that with an Asian appearance and black people and people from all over the world, and nobody asked them where they're from or where they learned to speak English that well, and nobody told them, oh, you can't, why are you on this course? You can't play Trigorin from The Seagull, or you can't play Chekhov characters. I mean, they're all white. Don't you know that they're white? What are you doing here? There's no slave role or no prostitute role in Chekhov. So why are you, nobody asked me. I kept waiting for, I'm sure you guys know that, for the moment somebody comes over to me and says, so where did you learn, so you're German? Why are you German? And how is that? And where did your parents meet? And da-da-da-da. But nobody did that. And it was just, I was just sitting there and seeing these, this girl from Hong Kong going on stage and acting beautifully and being a Sasha from Ivanov, a very famous Chekhov play. And the teacher was actually criticizing her or giving her regards for her acting, but he never questioned her looks. And that was just, I just wanted to share it. So for me, I wish like my colleagues from Naval Noir could have been here with me and experienced that, because it's just amazing. So that was just amazing. And I just love New York for that. So, yeah. Okay. When I think about my experience as an Afro-German and my journey to the term Afro-German, I immediately think of the black German writer and poet Maya Yim. I don't know whether many of you know her. She died in 1969 by the age of 36, but she left some marvelous writing, poems, lyric and essays, and I think even prose. And yeah, she was just a very, very great Afro-German artist and writer. I immediately think of the black German writer and poet Maya Yim because her work, the ways in which she used her experience to express herself in her art, how she shared her pain and her joys with others and turned it into something beautiful, highly influenced my own journey as an Afro-German and as an artist and as a woman and as a human being, actually. Maya Yim was the reason why I started to write myself, and I owe it to her that I could muster the courage and the curiosity to begin my own personal journey to my blackness and my Germanness, and to ask questions, to search, to experience community with other Afro-Germans, because for a long time, as much as I longed for community with other Afro-Germans, it also scared me in a way because it reminded me of all the things I had been missing for so long, and it was just something that I didn't want to unplug because I feared that it would be overwhelming. And it was through her writing that I really saw that how important it was and the beauty of it, actually. What does the term black German mean to me? Multiple things and experiences, both positive and negative and challenging. And again, for me, the term Afro-German is directly connected to Maya Yim. So let me start with her. It was at a reading in 2001 that I first encountered Maya Yim's spoken word poetry. You are Afro-German? Oh, I understand. African and German? "Oh, now that's an interesting mixture." So that's a quote from one of her spoken word poetries. It was as if a light bulb went on, and Maya Yim actually described my experiences, and she described the Afro-German reality, a reality that was my reality as long as I can think. Where do you come from? No, I mean, where do you really come from? No, you're not German. And you don't look like a German. Could I touch your hair? Gee, it's soft. How did your parents meet? Are you a soldier baby? Are your parents still together? May I touch your skin? Gee, it's soft. I envy you. I'd love to have skin like that. I'd love to have hair like that. Can you get sunburned? Why do you study acting with your looks? You can't play classical roles anyway, can you? Why do you study opera singing? Wouldn't you be better at jazz? And so on and so forth. Encouraged by Maya Yim's work, I began to take my own writing seriously, and at that time I had already written dramatic conceits, poems, and prose about my Afro-German experience. Now I realized that I shared these experiences with other Afro-Germans, and not only Afro-Germans, but Black people all over the world. In other words, I discovered the political dimensions of my reality, and I realized that what I had considered to be my very own personal problem was really the problem of the others. When I think about being Afro-German, I also have innumerable fond and positive memories. I remember my grandparents' home in Berlin, Tegel, and how when I was a little girl I enjoyed the time with my grandmother, helping her in the kitchen while she was telling me stories about the war. And I remember my mother's proud voice when somebody asked her if she adopted me, and she answered, "No, I made her myself." And I have fond feelings towards German bread, which just stands out in the whole wide world. There's no bread as delicious and tasty as German bread. No, it's true. It's what I miss most when I'm abroad. I love the flat land and white sky in North Germany, where I grew up after we left Berlin. I grew up in Bremen, near Hamburg, and the mountains and valleys in the south. And I remember colorful, joyful birthday parties under cherry trees in our huge garden, and that I was always allowed to bring as many friends home as I wanted, and they could always stay overnight, and then we would all have breakfast in bed, and my mother would tell us Brother Grimm stories, which I loved. And I think that was actually when my acting career started, when I tried to enact them afterwards. I remember what a sensational feeling it was when I discovered German literature, or literature written in German. The medieval writers Walter von der Vogelweide, Wolfgang von Eschenbach, Meister Eckhart, or classics and romantics, Goethe, Schiller, Annette Droste-Hülshoff, E.T.A. Hoffmann, Bettina von Arnhem, and the modernist and postmodernist, Büchner and Trakl and Hesse and Bachmann and Jelinek and Maya Yim, to name just a few. These writers made me aware of how deeply and strongly I'm bound to my homeland, Germany, to the German culture, mainly through the German language, which I consider to be one of the most beautiful and rich and versatile in the world. And Maya Yim told me that Black people are and always have been an important part of that culture. I also remember that I never felt as German as in London, where I studied acting and lived for 4 years. I was just overwhelmed by the fact that people constantly expected me to take a stand on German Nazi history, and my English fellow students approached me telling me that it would be inappropriate for me to express critical viewpoints about colonialism, as I'm from a country where much worse things happened. And it was then that I realized that it's already a life task to be Black, but that it's a twin-packed life task to be Black and German. And I will never forget the registration form that I had to fill in at my first day at acting school in London. and it had the question in it, which ethnic minority group do you belong to? Followed by an endless list of options, none of which applied to me. So there was white British, European, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Asian, Caucasian, Black American, Black African, Black British, Arabian, and so on. And I felt that none of them really applied to me. And so the very last option was other. So I just ticked that box, and I remember that that was the first time in my life that I really asked myself, who am I? Or do I have to adopt the black and white labels of my environment? And do I have to make myself fit into categories of black and white, European, or I don't know what? Or do I have the right to insist that I want to be regarded as a human being first and foremost? And how can I deal with the fact that the world seems to function in these categories? And what does it mean for me as an artist and as a woman and as a part of a black and white family unit? So issues around home, identity, belonging, as well as the search for my father and his family became crucial for me ever since. That, however, led to conflicts with my white mother. We had exactly the same conversation. And my white partner, and many of my friends who felt threatened and questioned by my new thoughts and discoveries and understandings, and they just couldn't understand why I was so much into this Afro issues all of a sudden. So my mother was kind of blaming it on London, and she really, thought that, so that's why I could really relate to that. So, she thought me being with other black people made me, changed me and made me critical about her, and she couldn't understand that it was not her in particular that I was critical about, and that I was just discovering something that was missing and that was very important for me. After I had finished my acting studies in London, I returned to Germany, to my reunited hometown, Berlin, to study opera singing. And for the first time in my life, I felt threatened because of my skin color. After the reunification, Germany experienced a very bad and ugly revival of racism and anti-Semitism, especially in the former German Democratic Republic and certain areas of East Berlin. So for the first time in my life, I avoided these areas that were known as neo-Nazi strongholds. I made sure not to use particular subway lines at particular times, and I watched out for skinheads who might get on the train, in which case I would get off immediately. And Maya Yim's work and her writings and her poems and essays, in which she also thematizes her experiences with racism in the reunited Germany, accompanied me during that time. And they became essentially important to me, and inspired by Maya Yim's literature, I consciously tried to get in contact with other afro-germans for the first time in my life. And I told them my story, and they told me their story, and I was shocked, and I was relieved, and I learned, and I unlearned, and I understood, and I was confused at the same time. So it was all that going on at the same time. And Label Noir was founded during that time as well, in 2008. Label Noir is an Afro-German theater ensemble, and we founded ourselves in 2008 in Berlin. And we were actually trying to get away from the cliche roles that the professional German theater, attached to us. So it was so overwhelming to get together with other Afro-German actors, professional actors, and to hear exactly the same story. So again, this issue of connecting is so important to hear, that they went through exactly the same thing that I went through. So they always had to play the prostitute, the DJ, the one with broken German, the boat people, kind of stuff, and never ever they had the chance, or somebody considered them to be able to play in a classical play, just because the black skin isn't supposed to represent something on stage in Germany, something other than these mediocre stereotypes. So we founded ourselves in 2008, and Labor Noir soon became an integral part of the Berlin theater scene. And our first production, Homeland Bittersweet Homeland, in which we addressed issues around home and identity and being black and German, had an enormous success throughout the country and was and still is shown in many important and mainstream theaters in Germany. And that was also something that that took us by surprise, because we actually wouldn't have thought that there's so many people out there who are interested in these issues. And so many, we did castings, and suddenly there were all these black actors from Switzerland, from Austria, from Germany, and they had all the same stuff. They just couldn't get into the business because, they wouldn't get any jobs because of their looks. The BBC reported about the premiere of Homeland Bittersweet Homeland in Berlin in 2010, and the play was also translated into English. And since 2 years, we are in negotiations with the German Association Society here in the US, because we would like to bring it here. So we see. So far, it couldn't be realized because of financial reasons, but we hope that we can bring it here. So finally, what would I most want to share with other Afro-Germans or black people? So maybe it's this. It is a painful realization that the fight against racism is only one front line we're fighting at. Being black is only one aspect of our personality, of our being. And on top of it, we have to struggle with all the other difficulties of life that everyone else has to struggle with as well. Conflicts with your parents, difficulties to establish a career, money issues, disappointments and disillusions of life, relationship problems, love sickness, all these pains of growth. And the fact that we are black in a predominantly white society influences and determines all these other battlegrounds as well. So we just can't take a vacation from being the other, at least not as long as we're in Germany. It feels completely different here, so, which is great again. But being black and German is also a huge advantage, I feel, and it's a treasure, and it's an unlimited resource of experience that we can scoop from as artists and human beings, as parents and friends and women and men and blacks and Germans, because we have an understanding and a knowledge about life that nations and societies all over the world need in order to survive in the globalized world of the 21st century, I think. So, yeah, and maybe what I want to share most importantly, take care of yourselves and treat yourselves well, and take time out. Don't make other people's problems your own, and stay in amicable terms with your guardian angel. Thank you.
So I had sent all of our panelists a series of questions. Lara-Sophie went through those questions and responded to them. And so what I want to do right now is to have you respond a little bit more generally to some other questions that have come up to me in listening to your different accounts. And then I want to lead over into your questions and engage everyone in a conversation. So the first question that comes up to me that I'd love to hear you talk about has to do with the idea of connection that all of you have talked about what does it mean to connect to a group of people, what does it mean not connect, to be cast out, to not belong to a group. And I want to put that in the context of being right here and right now, and sharing your reflections with this group. So could you comment on, or just think about the question, think out loud about the question, what does it mean to tell your story here? And it's almost two different questions. What does it mean to literally tell the stories that you've been telling, and talk about yourselves, talk about your journey to the term afro-German in this group, right? And then at the same time, this is a very specific group and place. We're talking about Black German identity, the term Black German in the United States, among people who share that history in the US. And all of you have talked about your journey to that term, both in Germany and outside of Germany. So I just want to hear a little bit more about that, because I think it's so key to understanding what it means to be Black German in different times and periods, is what does it mean to tell, to not just experience it, but to tell the story of it, and then to tell the story in different contexts. Does that make sense? Who wants to go first?
It's okay, I can start. To tell the story, for me, is very easy on one side. On the other side, extremely difficult, because obviously I'm a lot older than the other ladies, so I have a lot longer and many more years to go back, many more experience, many more hurts and pains that go along when you talk about your story, when you talk about your mother, your upbringing, a lot of the old, either looked at or not looked at, emotions are coming back up. And now you either have to deal with it, or you have to take all your energy and bottle them back up. So to me, I find it not only easy to talk about my story on one side, and it's easy because I'm very content with my life, very happy in my life. And the reason why I hesitated is because I lost my husband, and of course that is a very difficult thing. On the other hand, I have so much in my life that makes me happy. So speaking about my story is, like I said before, is easy in many ways, but especially this day here, listening to the ladies brought up many difficult times with my mother, many difficult emotions, because my mother also was later on in life and she couldn't bear the brand of the society anymore. She was an alcoholic, and so that kind of taints your memory a little bit. So this is what it, when you ask about what does it mean to tell your story, it's great, but it's also, to me, very difficult. And the other side, you were asking about connection. Connection, to me, as I had started earlier on, is being here, being with you. But it also has something to do with identity, because all of a sudden, when I found the Black German group, or when I found, actually, I had my very first contact in Chicago, where I listened to Ika Hügel, who had a presentation. I bought her book, and she had brought her American family, or her brother-in-law, or whatever, along to that presentation, and I was so in awe that she was living on both sides, the German and the American side, and that is when I had started developing a identity. There's a name for that. We are Black Germans, and we are proud to be somebody, and that is my identity and my history. And to bring that in the now and here, there's just one little anecdote, and I want to end with that. In 2006, my late husband and I became U.S. citizens, and I'm very proud of that. And so we had to fill out paperwork, maybe that much or that much, I forgot. And then we had to come to the FBI and so the FBI could do a background check on us to see if we are decent citizens. So, again, we filled out paperwork. You had to take your papers, walk up to a person who would then input all of that data into the computer. So, just like you, I hate to say African American or because, it doesn't address who all I am. But being the FBI, I wasn't going to be all that different. I made my cross and I walked over, and this man diligently put everything in the computer, and then I saw him mark Caucasian. And I said, you made a mistake. And he literally looked at me. In my face, he was as close as she is, and he said, all Germans are white. That's how I became a white person in America. So, if the FBI looks for me, good luck. So, and I wanted to end with that little anecdote. It's, to this date, I don't know, should I cry or laugh about it, because it's really not only funny, it was also like speechless. But that's the perception the world has. There are only white Germans, and this is why I am here, and that is why I'm working on that, and along with that organization to change that. And where I'm from, I live in South Carolina. I work with the YWCA, and empowerment of women and eliminating of racism is our mission, and that's what I'm standing for, and that's what we have to work on. Thank you.
I'm going to follow in your footsteps and say that it's really, really difficult to share the story. But as I said before, it's not even a choice anymore for me. Anyways, I have to. There's no question. I might be nervous. I thought I was going to vomit before coming out here, honestly. I didn't eat anything all day because I thought, no, it's going to come out. But yeah, it's not a choice. It's that when I teach German, that first day when I walk into class at UMass and I just see the faces of my students, that's all worth it almost. Just blowing their minds. Sometimes I sit in the very back of the room and I wait till everybody comes in, and then I stand up and I talk German for 10 minutes, and they're like, but it's, there's something really serious really behind it, because they would never, ever expect it. And so it's so important, I think, for us to tell our history here, but it's the same over there too. I was just in Berlin. I just came here 2 days ago, actually. And I was there all summer, and the Euro Cup was going on, and we watched the game. It was outdoors, and a friend of mine, we're sitting and we're talking, and I'm serious about football, right? I have a German zip up and colors on my cheek and all of that. And we're talking, we're just chatting away, and then a young gentleman who was sitting next to us the entire time, maybe he didn't hear us, maybe he did, I don't know, but he comes up to us and asks us in English, excuse me, ladies, we have a couple friends coming, so you're gonna have to move. And I said to him, Oh, I'm sorry, in English. Oh, really? How do you say it in German? Ja, zuerst kommt mal zuerst. The early bird gets the worm. Like, you know, and it's just those things that I get approached all the time in English. You know, I stand in the subway and I'm looking at the stops and whatnot, and then somebody comes up and asks me in English, do you need help? No, do you need help? And it's, you know, and it's just those little things, and it's important. Like, I actually had a longer conversation with that same gentleman, and at one point he's like, well, why do you have to embarrass me like that? I'm like, if I don't, who else? It needs to be said, you know, and there's so much to do. We're not done yet. And you know, I don't know, every time I go back to Berlin, it's a different Berlin. Now, Kreuzberg and Neukölln are the hipster areas. Everybody wants to go there. Back in the day, you didn't want to go there at night. It was rough turf, you know, and we almost prided ourselves that was rough turf, because some people could go and some people couldn't. You know, the people that were marginalized all the time were sort of safe there. And the people that did the marginalizing, maybe not so much. It's another story. But now you just have a very different Berlin, and there's still young people that are Black Germans, Turkish Germans, and they still need role models. They still need teachers, they still need doctors, they still need cashiers, lawyers, people at the university, and it's getting better, but it's not good yet. It's not good yet, at all. So that's why it's really, really important for me to tell our stories.
Yeah, so what does it mean to me to tell my story here, to begin from that direction, to tell my story here in front of you in New York, in the United States, feels very different from me than telling it in Germany. So, because here, whether or not it's true, but I have the feeling that I'm more understood, that people actually, even though they might not agree with me on certain points or they have other viewpoints, but that there's a certain kind of common understanding about what's possible and what's impossible in terms of racism, even though you know, of course it also exists here, but in Germany, you know, I find myself again and again in conversations with educated, clever, beautiful people, but then I have to explain to them why I don't want them to call me nigger or something. And they start to explain to me that it comes from negro, and negro means black, and it's just, you know, I think there's not even, I don't know, there's no common ground from which we can start. You know, I just want to scream or cry, or I don't know, and I even have that with you know, friends and or colleagues at work, and then you're constantly in the situation. What are you doing now? Like you with the FBI, but it's only the FBI, so you only meet them once in your life. Hopefully. You know, if it's friends or family, then you always have to decide, okay, am I going to make an issue out of this now, or I just don't say anything, and there's a racist joke there, or there's this there. So I just laugh along, and you know, because I like that guy or I like that girlfriend, but actually it hurts. So and here I feel more secure. So I don't know what it would be like when I was living here, but so it definitely feels different, especially as an actress, as I was mentioning before, because there are like so much more possibilities for me here, or so black people, I feel. Are not as limited as in Germany. That's to say they don't exist in the theater in Germany. So you have this colorful picture in the streets, Turkish people, black people, I don't know, Asian looking people. Many of them are Germans, right? So but that's like so they don't look like the stereotype German. And then you enter a theater and they are gone, like they're just not there. You might find them, in the refectory, giving out food, or maybe as toilet women or men, in the toilet. But you don't see them as directors. You don't see them as actors. They are not a single. So I did research for an article that I wrote, and I went through all the ensembles in Germany. And Germany has lots of theaters. We have lots of. I think no country has more theaters than Germany, and they are actually maintained by the state. So we pay tax to some money for these theaters. And I think I found 5 people. One of them was black. So, and the others were, I think, with Turkish background, but you could see that shows people, couldn't really see that they're Turkish, but their name was Turkish, so you could, yes, or maybe there's some, but really they are not there. And at the moment, we have a very horrible public discussion going on about blackfacing. I don't know whether some of you heard about that, because it was actually triggered by Bruce Norris, an American playwright who wrote Clyburn Park, which won the Pulitzer Prize last year. And I had the honor to play in it at the State Theater in Mainz. There are 2 black roles there. And I was lucky that they did a Bruce Norris play, because here was my niche. So, and it was a great role. It was not a prostitute, it was not a dealer, it was a real character, the reason why you study acting. So, and then they wanted to do it at the German Theater in Berlin. One of the most important and biggest theaters in Germany, and they actually took a white actress and wanted to blackface her for the part. And I saw that on the website. I saw on the website I wanted to do Clyburn Park, and then I thought, just look who's playing my role, because I'm always happy when other black actors are up there, and then. I saw it's a white actress, so I actually asked Bruce Norris and said, I'm very interested why you made that choice. And he actually didn't know anything about it. They just decided it themselves, and told him they would experiment with makeup, which actually meant black person, and it was a horrible. He then, took away the rights for the play, and he took them away from them. So he told them, you can do the play if you hire a black actress, and they said no. So they decided to lose all that money. They stopped the rehearsals, the play didn't take place because they didn't want to do it, and they put on another black-facing production instead. And I was just, so I was part of a committee that tried to make them understand. We had a meeting with the artistic director, and I tried to bring over to him what was wrong with that. And that's what I mean by it's different to tell the story here or there. And he just said, but that's an artistic device. It has a long tradition. So what's wrong with it? He literally didn't get it. And we were just stunned. I mean, there was, so I'm often in that situation that I feel I don't even know. It's like I speak, I don't know, Chinese, and you speak German, and we just can't communicate. I mean, we just don't, you speak the same language. So much for being understood. Connecting, as has already been said a couple of times, I think it's very important, because as long as you're not connected to others, you stand for yourself, and you feel alone, and you think you're the only one who experiences that, and you think that it's your fault in a way. So at least that was the case with me. So you think something's wrong about you, and when you're approached again and again, where are you from, why don't you speak German that well? No, I mean where you're really from and all that. Then you start to question, why am I here? Do I belong here? Am I really German? Or maybe I belong somewhere else? And I think it's very important to connect with other people, to just share that experience and to give each other strength to, in that battle. And for me personally, at this point in my life, as I mentioned before, it's also very hurtful because I'm actually just now at the point in my life, so I'm sure I'm much older than you, but where I really think about leaving Germany. So that's why I took the course here. I talked a lot to the teachers, and I tried to find out what I can work in because it's difficult if you don't have an American passport and all that. But I'm very connected to my country. I love my country. I have all my family there. And as an actress, especially, I'm very connected to the language. But nobody wants to hear my stories in German. So here I am, talking to my voice teacher at the Lara-Sophie. Oh, can you give me voice lessons so I can get an American accent and can get rid of all this German stuff, because then, I have more possibilities here. And I really think I will move here because I don't know. I did all I can do, and I will continue with Le Noir. But it's just, life passes by, and I'm not prepared to spend my life teaching white Germans about blackfacing. So, no, and I don't want my children to grow up in that environment. And at the moment, at this point in my life, I'm just, I'm not prepared to put up with that anymore. And so to say that, and to say it and to talk about it publicly is also hurtful, because your own country is always your home country, and you can't do anything about that. And it's hurtful if you feel like you're not accepted there, or parts of you are not accepted, and you actually have to leave in order to maybe return then again and find a new approach or a new way to be there or to live there.
I want to open up to questions from the audience, and there's probably a number of them. Here's one right here.
Hi, my name is Deborah Abel. I'm a dermatologist, and I also am a member of the European Dermatology Association, and I go to meetings in Europe about every other year. When I go to Germany, I never see any black physicians at the meetings. So my question is, and you were bringing up the fact that you want to see more physicians and attorneys and cashiers. What are the institutional barriers in the educational system? I have two Afro-German cousins in Munich who I've they don't know their Black American ancestry. I've decided to adopt them, so I go over there, and I worry about their future. They're both very bright kids, but I'd like to know what will be the barriers for them to progress in the professional fields, in their particular fields.
Well, I can only speak of the time frame that I was in Germany, growing up and preparing to be led into high school, and then being in high school. How it is today, I'm sure has changed since then. But for example, in elementary school, my best friend and I, and she's Kurdish Turkish, had the exact same grades. And starting in 4th grade in Berlin, back then, the teacher decided whether or not you would go to preparatory high school that would then allow you to go to university, or whether you would stay in a more of a vocational high school, or more in the lower trade school, high school. Okay? The teacher decided that.
Not based on grades or...
Yes, based on
grades and parents.
Yeah, not back then, not in Berlin,
not
parents. So we had the exact same grades. I got placed higher than she did. I don't know what that says about racism in Germany altogether, since I'm black and she's not, but she belonged to the even more marginalized group, Turkish people. She had to fight her way up. She now is studying, but it took a long time. I want to say that it got better over the years, but I don't know. When I came here when I was 16, and college and university, I did all that here. So that system over there confuses me. I don't know how they operate. So if somebody else in the audience maybe knows, maybe, yeah?
I mean,
well, it's hard. It's harder to get into a higher school in Germany if you're Afro-German. I went to the to gymnasium from the very beginning because I had very good grades and everything. But my little sister had a little more problems, and she was suited to go to the Hauptschule. And my dad said no. He said, she's not dumb, she has just a little problem in one subject. But the teacher said, no. She's not suitable for the Realschule, she needs to go to the Hauptschule. My dad ended up fighting with the teacher and saying, my daughter's not going to the Hauptschule because if she's going to the Hauptschule, she has really big problems to come up. So he fought, and my sister went to the Realschule, and after that she went to the gymnasium. In Germany, you have to fight, actually, sometimes for the right. Because now my cousin, also Afro-German, was placed lower because he had bad grades in math, and he won a prize in German, in a German school as Afro-German, which was like, oh my God, he's Afro-German, he can speak German. Well, okay. And it sounds like really bad, but it's really like this. He needed to fight. I mean, it's really different, and you have to fight for your right, kind of. But never underestimate your own children, and always believe in them, even they're like not so good at one point because it's hard in the schools. Maybe they get bad in the beginning because you're a parent, but you don't know what's going on in the classroom.
So progression is based on an individual,
Yeah.
and if the individual has a bias, then
Yeah.
they can.
The teachers.
I also feel that, it really depends on whether you get, support from your teachers or not, whether they believe in you or not, and also your parents, their stand in society. So I noted that it's harder for black people, but even harder if their parents are both black as well, or if they grow up with the black part. And and I think they're just not encouraged. They don't say, oh, you're good in science, you could be a doctor, or you could be an actress. I mean, they told me when I wanted to join the theater group, again, they told me actually then what they're telling me now, so you can't join. So because you can't, what are you supposed to play? So, and I had enormous support at home from my white mother, but she, again, was the one who, because it's the same story. Like we also get recommendations. I don't know whether you still have that, or you already had that when you went to school, or still had that in Germany. But after you spend 6 years in elementary school, then you get recommendation whether you go to the higher education branch, or the middle, or the lowest, the Hauptschule. And I even had good grades, and I got the middle thing, just got it. And my mother couldn't understand it and went there and said, why? So it really depends whether your parents have the strength. Often they have to struggle as well with issues. If they're both black, they have enough struggles going on for themselves, so maybe they don't have the strength to support you that much at school. But then I went to gymnasium anyway, and I did a great abitur, but the teacher didn't see that in me. He just said, oh, she's not able to do it. I don't know why.
Do you think being black would decrease a parent's motivation to fight for their, have the wherewithal to fight for their children in that system?
No, I don't mean to twist that. I just say that because I help a lot of people, like friends and family, to go with them to the Foreign Office, and if they don't have the German, because in Germany you also have that thing, you might be born there and you speak the language fluently, but you're not German because your parents are from, I don't know, Nigeria or something. So, and then, and they have to go through an everyday struggle at the office, at, some kind of governmental stuff and passport issues and this and that. And they are subjected to racism as well. So I just say that it might be even, more difficult for them to then, even have to struggle for their kids at school and give them all the support they would need there, or the kids don't even tell them maybe. So I hear that from a lot of Turkish people as well, or Germans with Turkish background, that they don't want to bother their parents with that, so they just don't tell them, and just shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink until at some point they might even do what the teacher sees in them and really get bad grades and bad notes. And so I think it's complicated, but if you look at it as a whole, it's a pattern. I mean, that's why you don't find them, that's why in the end you don't find them in the theater, you don't find them in the hospitals, because even to be an actor, you have to be trained, you have to have higher education, or a doctor, or a lawyer, but it starts really early on, I think.
At the same time, I feel like one thing we have to acknowledge that's really important is the three people who are sitting here, right? That there's a kind of contradiction between the story that you're telling about the extraordinary the difficulties that you have to overcome, and yet you overcome, right? Because you are an actress in theater, and you are somebody who did achieve your education, and Carmen is someone who became a leader and an entrepreneur. And so part of me feels like we need to acknowledge that as well. that the story you're telling makes it even more significant that you're sitting here telling it. And that's something that was another question that I had, which is the other thing that I think is so exceptional about this particular group of women here is the diversity of, your different generations. And the consistency of the story that you're telling is really striking, but at the same time, there's a dramatic difference in the way in which you've each come to cope with it, And so the way in which, so I was actually wondering if you see, each of you talked about encountering the term Black German and when that became your term, and also about what it meant to no longer be defined by your outside, right? To take on your own identity. I'm wondering about after that moment, after the moment when you took up Black German, when that became the term that made you make sense. Do you have a different relationship now to that term than you did in that initial moment? And if so, why and when and how? Because you all talk about that as a moment in the past, and now you're here. So I was just wondering if you would share anything about that. Because the term Black German has been around for a while, and I think that the different people who are using it have given it their own meaning too. And you all have given it your own meaning based on your own specific experiences.
When I look at the term Black German, as I had shared earlier, for me to get to know the term was like coming home. And coming home is such a great feeling. when I look at it from today, what I have learned is we are not all the same. We are not all, we are not all the same. We just, by sitting here with those two wonderful young ladies, we have such different lives, and yet, we are Black Germans, and that connects us, and so, there is that connectivity again. But at the same time, I have also realized that, yes, I'm Black German and I'm proud about it, but you know what? I'm Carmen, and that to me is the most important thing that I have learned in my life. I am who I am. I'm a Black German and all of the other things, but foremost, I'm a human being, I'm a strong woman, and I'm Carmen. And that I have learned, for me, is a whole lot more important than hang on to that term now and make, try to make myself fit into a group again. No, I'm part of that group, and I'm very proud to be part of that group, but at the same time, I will not allow it to define me. I'm gonna define myself. That's what, that is what I feel today about it. And as much as I love to be here and to connect, and that also, in that respect, I want to say thank you to you again, because I think it's awesome that we can be here. But for me, it means me, Carmen, and I don't want to sound like, I'm the most important thing, but to me it's important that I define myself as this person, and this person is also a Black German, and has a history, and has a connection, and I guess that's where I'm coming from.
It was interesting what you said, that we're all here and we're sort of defying that, the story that we're telling, and contradicting it a little bit. And, I hear often, well, you're like the American dream. You came to America and you made it. But I had a lot of help along the way. And I think I'm an exception. I don't think the majority can say the same. There's a lot of people that come into this country trying to make it, whatever that trying to make it is for them. And to me, where I am right now is exactly where I wanted to be. But only because of that term and what I associate with that. That it's again, it's not an option. It's like I have a fight song in my head when I hear it, because I have a job. And I need to, whatever I do needs to matter. When I teach, it needs to be part of it. It's been a long day. I don't know if Peggy said that earlier, but when she walks in the door, she brings race into the room. Yeah. I feel the same way. When I read a text, it's in the back of my head. And I do this fun little thing when I read canonical German texts. I try to find the hidden, wo versteckt sich der Neger? I know he's there somewhere. He's going to be mentioned in another shape or form. And then I find him, I'm like, aha, there we go. Let's write about it. Let's push some of these people off the pedestal that don't need to be there anymore, because we have other people that need to be on the pedestal. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, to a certain extent it is contradictory that we are here, although German society did a lot of this here. But, and I think, it's good to celebrate that and to be proud of that, because you need that as well. You can't, just eat all this this negative stuff and never say, okay, this is what I've achieved, or we've achieved, and others achieved, and brothers and sisters achieved. But I think that, there could be many more of us, because I think that I can, especially talk for the field of acting and music, and I think there's so many talented Black artists out there who shy away from a career from the very beginning because they see people like myself or my colleagues at Les Noirs, and we are there, but they see how we struggle, and they think, oh, I don't want that. I better go into the niche that society offers me, so I have a quiet life, because it's strenuous. It's work. I mean, it's worthwhile, but it's very laborious, and I think you also have to take care that you're not used as a kind of token Black who made it, because I had that a lot. So at the moment I'm at the State Theatre in Mainz, and I'm there since 1.5 years now, which is a sensation, as a guest, not as an ensemble member. And they call me every time there's a, because integration and all that, and foreign politics, they're huge in Germany at the moment, because politics now begin to realize what they did wrong in the past, and they don't know why Black people, Turkish people, leave the country, or they're not integrated. So they start to think about that, and they have all these panels, even in the theater. In the theater, there's less and less people go to the theater, so they ask themselves, how do we get Black people and Turkish people and all these people? How do we get them into the theater? And then they call me and say, oh, could you speak at that panel? And, oh, could you come to that event? And in the beginning, I felt very flattered. And, oh, well, yeah. Of course, as a representative of Labor 9, and I realized they always call me. When it's a topic about foreigners and being ostracized, and what's it like as a Black actor, but they never call me and ask me for my opinion about a normal production, or as an artist. They say, oh, we'd like to have you at the panel as an expert for Shakespeare or something. I don't know. So I realized they kind of use me and say, what are you talking about? So it's hard for Black people as an actor. You are an actress, so so I think just because individuals made it, I think it says more about these individuals than about the society. Yeah, they're exceptionally persistent.
Are there other questions? There are many. Why don't you start here?
I actually have more of a comment. A lot of what you've said really resonates with me, and it's really nice to, it's sad to hear that these things happen, but in a way it's nice for me because I feel like, oh my gosh, other people experience this too. But, so I wanted to say lots of nice things, but then listening to you talk more, I'm thinking of all the frustration that's there too. One thing that just came up now, sort of as I'm listening to in the last 5-6 minutes or so, is this frustration, and Kevina, it also came out in when you were speaking, this frustration almost having to explain yourself to someone, right? Which I particularly dislike as I get older, because I feel like I'm less and less articulate about it, and I feel like I have to but yet I have to justify something, right? I have to justify to you why this is a part of my identity. And I get so tired of that. And so, So I wish when I do have these interactions, I could have all of you there so you could help me articulate that, and I could just, sort of take a back seat on that. But it just reminds me of something actually, that this poem, it's in a collection of essays and poetry. It's in this bridge called My Back. Gloria is one of the editors of that, and that there's a poem in there called This Bridge called My Back, and it just expresses exactly that feeling that I have, is I'm so tired of explaining to you what my identity is, how it is, and why it could also possibly represent the identity of these other people too. And then the poem is very political in the sense that, rather than spending all this time explaining yourself, really what we need to do is have, bond together and have us, form coalition and fight instead of spending all our energy explaining ourselves to other people. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to say, you were saying it just now, I'm so tired of that. And here I feel like I don't have to do that because I'm constantly surrounded by people who have these very complex identities and backgrounds in the same way that I do. So I don't know, maybe I'm being a little bit racist towards German society.
It seems to me that the panelists in their wonderful presentations all alluded to the extreme vulnerability of individuals in the absence of a community, which is an experience common to people of African descent in Europe, and to which I can relate, being born in Paris. So I was wondering, to what extent do you think we can reverse the tendency and acknowledge a community without falling into essentialism?
A hard question.
What do you mean by essentialism?
Well, how not to essentialize the term afro-german, for instance. And when a group is created, when a new group, a new identity is created, especially in the context of social hostility, the tendency is precisely to sort of close the borders again. And I was wondering if there was any thought around opening up the term Afro-Germans so that it serves as a kind of common ground for people to meet, but at the same time that it doesn't enclose an identity in a way that...
I think there was an open... So as far as I'm informed, it was like the term was officially, I don't know, created or conceived by the Initiative of Black Germans in the 80s. Audre Lorde played an important part there because she came to Berlin and told, you should find a name for yourselves other than all the other names. So, and then they, this term Afro-German came about, and then it was extended to black people in Germany because not every person who feels Afro-German, who's, for example, born there but doesn't have the passport because their parents are from somewhere else, is German by passport but still feels German. So I think that term was extended to people, or even black people who lived in Germany for a long time and are just part of the culture there, would be Afro-Germans as well. But I think in terms of, the danger to ostracize yourself again, I think that's probably a transitional, if it's at all the case, then it's maybe a transitional phenomenon that you always have. I mean, if you think about the women's movement, I think it was important that that you had a protected space where you could be amongst women only. It didn't mean you're discriminating against men, but because you were in the early stages of defining, your rights and, what women meant to you and all that, and to fight for essential rights. I think it was important then, probably more than it is now, to say, okay, men are not allowed here, which doesn't mean we don't like them or something. It's just that we have to have this protected space. So, because we were confronted with questions like that many times with Labor Noir, because we have only black actors. So people came over to us and said, oh, we want to join white actors, and it's racist if you say we can't join because we're white. And I found that very peculiar, because I thought, you have all these possibilities. You can go to all the theaters, you're accepted there. I'm not, and now you're telling me just, I created a little space for myself I do all the work to keep that alive, and now a white actor is telling me I'm racist because I don't let him in. I think, I think that stage is, I think it's not discriminating, or I think it's not excluding yourself. I think it's finding yourself in order to then be able to go out and be yourself and have a sense of yourself. So yeah, that's what I think.
I think what's, and it's been going on for a while now in Germany, but what I want to happen is for more solidarity among all subcultures in Germany. That's not quite happening yet, but you can already see tendencies among certain groups. I have a whole bunch of friends that are Black Germans that converted over to Islam, and some of them are getting extreme. And I have friends that I grew up with, Turkish, that decided just in the last 2 years to cover themselves up all the way. And they're not doing that for fun. They're doing that because they're tired, sick and tired of being marginalized and discriminated against, that they're saying, why integrate? You know, I have friends that have that mentality, Deutsche raus, Ausländerei, you know, and it's getting a little dangerous. But it's already, you know, I had some interesting conversations actually today here. Person is not here anymore, okay. But it's even amongst Black Germans, you know. We don't want skin color to matter, but even amongst us, it's not as unified as I wished it was, or as I'm sure other people wished it was as well. Like, it's, you know, I understand what other people told me today, but at the same token, I wish we would just say, hey, we're just all Black Germans. Let's just leave it at that. Let's just not care about pigmentography. Let's just not care about hair color. You know, but it's unfortunately, we're not all the way there yet, but we're getting there. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
We are approaching the end of our session, so I'm going to ask for one more question. Actually, now there's 2 more questions. Let's do 2 questions at once and then have final responses, okay?
I think it's just difficult to be the first.
No.
I'm sorry.
She's got one.
Oh, sorry.
Then why don't you go ahead, Deborah?
I just think it's difficult to be the first in anything. Ambassadors. I think about the civil rights struggle, you know, in this country in the 50s and 60s, where the first people in this, the first Black people on TV, it's very difficult, and you have to answer more questions and more things until the general public understands. And then it's so much easier afterwards. I remember being at Harvard with the first large group of Black people. We did a lot of answering questions to people who were so naive about our culture, about where we came from. You go to Harvard now, those kids don't have to answer as many of the same questions. I'm just giving you an example. It is, you know, you turn the TV on and you see Black characters on The Good Wife or other shows. You don't think twice about seeing a Black character on TV. But in the 60s, there was a Black person on TV, people got on the phone and called everybody and said, there's someone Black on TV, and everybody watched. It was the first. We answered a lot of questions. I think it's difficult, and it will be difficult because the trendsetters, the ambassadors, are going to have to do a lot more explaining, a lot more hard work until the followers catch up.
Thank you. One last comment?
I think we were definitely on the same page because listening to you say that you feel so disheartened in Germany that you want to move to US, because you are suffering, for a lack of a better word. And I always think about this, you know, and it's not my idea, but this idea that could we have had a Barack Obama without a Sidney Poitier? You know, I don't think so, because I think people need to be introduced to ideas, and Denzel, you know, Denzel Washington, and all of these other black actors that came and kind of normalized the presence of colored faces in front of us. I just really wish you could speak about, you know, not forgetting about theater, which is very important, but more popular culture and television and, you know, contemporary music and film in Germany. That when we see, you know, people like Daniel Brühl, you know, where are the black Thandie Newtons in Germany? Where are the black Naomi Harrises in Germany, just in contemporary film?
That is a big and wonderful question that I think a lot of our panelists tomorrow are going to speak to. So in an attempt to get us all to the performance on time, and an attempt to get us all out of the cold and into the warm, I'm going to ask you to thank our panelists one more time.